The Constitution, the founding document of the government of the United States. Ratified in 1787 as a replacement for the Articles of Confederation, it is the basis of our republican form of government. Surprisingly, though, it says very little about elections and voting. Why is that? And what does it say? Hi, I'm Bennett, and I'm Professor of History at Florida Atlantic University and Director of the Voting Rights History Civic Literacy Project. And I'm here with 3 things you need to know about the Constitution and voting. 1. Until the passage of the 15th Amendment, the Constitution said nothing about the right to vote. For the authors of the Constitution, the critical question was the balancing of state and federal power. Few in the room in Philadelphia in 1787 wished to see the federal government have much power over voting, and so they left the Constitution with little to say about the practice. Instead, they left the issue of how voting worked to the states. Each state could establish voter eligibility and decide how elections would be run. The states, meanwhile, largely maintained the system of elections they'd had during the colonial era. For a half-century after the passage of the Constitution, most states allowed only white men with property to vote. There were some ways, however, that the Constitution gave the federal government some power with regard to elections. First, the Constitution guarantees that every state will have a republican form of government. What the founders meant by that is that every state government should reflect in some way the will of the people. Second, it gave Congress the power to pass laws with regard to the election of representatives. Congress could, for example, set the date of elections for representatives. Third, it gave the houses of Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate the right to evaluate the qualifications of those elected to their bodies. Also, it gave them the right to refuse to seat anyone whose election was suspect. 2. The Constitution established new governmental offices, representative, senator, and the president, and established the qualifications for each. It also established rules for how each was to be elected. The House of Representatives is based on the size of the population. Each state is given proportional representation. There were 65 seats in the first Congress, but the Constitution allowed for that number to be expanded. In 1929, Congress froze the number of seats in the House of Representatives at 435. To be a representative, one must be at least 25 years old, be a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years, and be a resident of the state they represent. Representatives are elected to 2-year terms, and they're elected directly by the people they represent. The Senate, meanwhile, gives each state equal representation with 2 senators per state. To be a senator, one must be at least 30 years old, have been a citizen of the United States for 9 years, and again, reside in the state in which you represent. Senators are elected to 6-year terms. When the Constitution was written, the delegates set it up so that each senator would be elected by the legislature of the state they represented, not by the people directly. One argument for this was that senators were supposed to represent the interests of their entire state. The delegates, however, also simply wanted to limit the power of the people. Legislatures varied in how they selected senators, but most ended up holding special sessions in which they elected senators. In 1913, the ratification of the 17th Amendment changed it so that senators are now directly elected by the people. The Constitution also created the executive branch, which is the presidency. If one wishes to be president, he or she must be at least 35 years old, a natural-born citizen, and must have lived in the United States for 14 years prior to their election. Presidents are elected to 4-year terms. The Constitution at first placed no limit on the number of terms a president could hold. George Washington established a precedent by refusing to run for a 3rd term. This precedent held until Franklin Delano Roosevelt successfully ran for a 3rd term in 1940 and then a 4th term in 1944. In response to Roosevelt's breaking of the precedent, Congress ratified the 22nd Amendment in 1951 to limit presidents to 2 terms. 3. The Constitution established the Electoral College for electing presidents. One of the deepest fears of the authors of the Constitution is that somebody might use the tools of democracy to rise to power and then abuse that power and trample on the rights of those that disagreed with the majority. They feared that a simple majority vote for president might empower such a person. They designed the Electoral College to put brakes on the popular will. Each state is given a number of electors equal to the number of representatives and senators that state has. The Constitution is vague about who these electors are and how they are to be selected. Most of that was left to the states. The original system treated each presidential candidate equally. Electors from each state voted for 2 candidates regardless of office. The results would then be sent to the President of the Senate. Whoever got the majority of the vote would be then the President, and whoever came in second would be the Vice President. If there was a tie, or no one received the majority for the presidency, the election would then be sent to the House of Representatives, where each state would receive 1 vote. It was a hastily constructed system that assumed that only a handful of elites would ever be running for the office of president. And it worked for the first 3 elections, but the election of 1800 almost broke the system. When the votes were tallied, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr had exactly the same number of votes for president. Their election then was sent to the House of Representatives, but neither person could get a majority until weeks before Inauguration Day. To correct this, the Congress and the states ratified the 12th Amendment in 1804. Under the new rules, electors cast 1 vote for president and 1 vote for vice president. The 12th Amendment effectively created our modern system of people running in pairs, 1 for president and the other for vice president. Changes like the 12th Amendment and other amendments dealing with voting demonstrate that the Constitution was far from perfect when it was ratified in 1787. The details of elections and voting were vague and often left to the states. Events demonstrated the need for more specific language over time. In the end, however, this was for the best, because it's allowed Americans over time to decide how their democratic republic should operate. The flexibility through the amendment process has allowed the United States to become more democratic over time.